Guardians of the Blade by Adalene Martis. Chapter 3. Ready to talk? Therak, Therak! Her voice called to him as a dark shape crawled over his body, rubbing against him. He saw flashes of sinuous muscles shifting under dark fur, the curve of her hips as she slid over him. He woke with a start to find that it was morning, and that he'd dirtied his sheets. Disgusted with himself, he rubbed his blanket roughly over his stomach, only to find that he was rubbing his mess deeper into his fur. Therak swung his legs out of bed. As soon as he put weight on his feet, he winced. The old injury on his knee had flared, and the joint was ridiculously swollen, as if someone had smacked him with a club. Damn it! He cursed. There was no way he would be running to Nyra's ship today. Therak limped over to the sink and looked in the mirror, groaning at what he saw. His cum-stained fur clung to itself in clumps, and his mane was a mess. Therak let out an exhausted sigh as he reached out for the faucet. It had been a long night, and all he wanted right now was to be clean. He flicked the faucet switch on, expecting the familiar rush of water. Instead, a sputtering stream of water coughed and wheezed its way out of the tap, as if the last remaining water pump in the facility was struggling to keep up. "You've got to be kidding me," Therak muttered, glaring at the faucet as if it was his mortal foe. The water continued to spit and sputter, each reluctant drop accompanied by the strained groaning of the pump somewhere down the line. Therak could feel his patience slipping away. "Don't you dare quit on me now!" he snapped, giving the faucet a firm shake to force it into obedience. As he stood there, struggling to keep himself from truly breaking the sink, the water began to stabilize, gradually becoming steady and strong once more. Therak let out a relieved breath, shooting the faucet one last warning glare before plunging his hands into the water. He tried to clean off the mess. Unfortunately, the smell of cum stubbornly clung to him. He hadn't made a mess like this since he was a teenager, when his sisters had first started going into heat and tramped around the house getting their scent everywhere. From that experience, Therak knew he had to get Nyra's smell out of his room, and to do that, he had to get her medicine as soon as possible. After that, he wasn't sure. Ideally, she'd volunteer to join the crew and would help him repair the facility without trying to escape or get revenge. Therak scoffed at the thought. The bitter laugh came out forcefully. He'd met mercenaries who could set aside their personal feelings and focus on the mission at hand. However, he couldn't expect such a practical attitude from a civilian. At most, they'd learn to tolerate each other, but it was more likely that he'd always have to watch his back around her. The wet dream troubled him. Perhaps having her around was going to be too much of a liability. The room seemed to grow cold as Therak found himself thinking about how to kill her painlessly. A disruptor blast? Behead her with his sword? He stood motionless in front of the sink, his vacant gaze fixed on the torrent of water rushing from the faucet. In the quiet of the failing facility, the sound of the water echoed like a chorus of whispers, a hissing sound of madness slipping into his thoughts. His mind drifted to dark places. As the thoughts flooded his consciousness, his face contorted into a pained expression, as if he were being tormented by what he saw. The hissing of the sink seemed to grow louder, drawing him in. He felt like he was falling, swirling like the water about to go down the drain. In a sudden moment of clarity, he reached out towards the faucet, his hand trembling. With a forceful flick of his finger, he shut off the water, and the torrent was replaced by an eerie silence. Therak closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. As the last remnants of water spiraled down the drain, he willed his ruthless thoughts to do the same, pushing them away into the darkness where they belonged. When he opened his eyes, his face was calm once more. the haunted expression replaced by a steely determination to keep his prisoner. No, to keep Nyra, the innocent Felina who had done nothing wrong, as safe and happy as possible, even if that meant taking some risks. Therak took a deep breath, licked his hands, and ran his fingers through his mane in an attempt to tame the unruly strands. The water from the faucet had helped clean his fur, but his reflection still showed signs of redness in his eyes. He straightened, squaring his shoulders, and looked over the line of his jaw. He plucked a few outstanding gray hairs. Once his hair was as good as it was going to get. He went to the closet and managed to find some clothes that didn't have holes worn in them. He tried his best to angle his sheath to where the inevitable erection he was going to get would grow down his leg instead of out of his pants. Little Therak was extremely mobile. He used to be able to angle it as he wished. However, it had been a long time since he'd tried to control those muscles. Better to be prepared. Fighting with an arousal in front of her probably wasn't the best way to make her feel comfortable. Finally satisfied that he was as ready as possible, he turned toward the door. His footsteps echoed softly in the corridor as he limped down the hall toward Nyra's room. The metallic walls of the facility reflected the dim lighting, casting long shadows that danced with his movement. Each step caused a twinge in his swollen knee, but he ignored the discomfort. His mind was focused on the conversation ahead. Reaching the door, he hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the control panel. He recalled their last encounter, the fear in her eyes, the tension in her posture as he had given her that stark choice. Shaking off the memory, he tapped the panel, and the door slid open with a quiet whoosh. Inside, the room was modestly lit, revealing Nyra seated on the edge of the small bed. Her ears perked up at the sound of the door, and her eyes darted toward him, widening ever so slightly. She appeared both alert and cautious, her tail curled tightly around her. The dim light accentuated the subtle patterns in her fur, but there was a visible stiffness in her posture. Nyra's gaze locked onto Therak's, a mix of emotions flickering across her face, apprehension, defiance, and a hint of vulnerability. Since he had left her here, the weight of his ultimatum seemed to have pressed heavily upon her. Around her golden irises, her eyes were bloodshot. He wondered if she had slept at all. As he stepped inside, the air seemed to thicken with her musk. He was submerged in her scent. Freezing for a moment, he subtly guided the growing tightness down his pants leg. As he stood frozen in the doorway, his imposing figure was framed by the corridor's light. Nyra's eyes grew large as she watched what was growing alongside his leg. She held up her forearm, looking between little Therak and her arm as if comparing, then gulped. She shuddered, then straightened her back, lifting her chin slightly in a show of resilience. "Have you come for my decision?" she asked. Therak noted the steadiness in her voice and the determination in her eyes. He stepped further inside, allowing the door to close softly behind him. "No," he replied evenly. "I've decided I don't want to hurt you, even if you ask me to." Nyra's brows furrowed. "Are you being serious? I wouldn't joke about this. I think you could be useful to me. I want to know what skills you have. But first, how are you holding up?" he asked. She blinked, momentarily taken aback by the concern in his tone. It clearly wasn't what she had expected. "I'm managing," she answered cautiously, "though I can't say the accommodations are particularly welcoming." He gave a slight nod. "I apologize for that. Resources are limited here, but I'll improve your quarters as soon as I can." A brief silence settled between them. Nyra studied him closely. "So what sort of jobs have you done in the past, Miss Nyra?" Therak prompted gently. Nyra pulled her head back sharply, as if she had been smacked in the face by his words. She laughed in disbelief and palmed her forehead. "You really are serious? After everything you've done, you're giving me an interview?" "No. No. Let's be honest, shall we? You're trying to enslave me, you fucking asshole." She hissed at him, her ears flattening. Therak turned around, getting ready to leave. "I can see you're not ready to talk. I'll come back later." Therak spent the next couple of hours in the mess hall, icing his knee with frozen hunks of meat. When he was done, he diced up one of the hunks, seasoned it with salt, and then fried it until it turned golden brown. He then made gravy out of the fat by adding some water and thickening it with old bone flour. He poured the gravy over the meat and brought it back with him to Nyra's room. Therak's mouth was watering as he opened the door. Nyra was waiting for him. She was sitting at the only table in the room and had set up a metal stool across from her, which was clearly meant for him. He walked over and set the plate of meat and gravy in front of her. "Ready to talk?" he asked. She nodded and motioned for him to join her. "Give me a second," he said as he adjusted himself, waiting for the tingling of his most sensitive skin to settle down before he took a seat. Nyra took a slow breath, her ears flicking back momentarily as she steadied herself. Therak considered her changed attitude and was hopeful. Perhaps she could be practical, after all. "I'll be frank," Therak began. "This facility is falling apart, and I need your help. If you join my crew, you'd be expected to contribute to the maintenance and operation of this facility. Can you do it or not?" "I can," she said. Therak felt a surge of relief course through him, which he tried not to let show. "If you help me, I'll do everything I can think of to make your time here as easy and enjoyable as possible." She arched an eyebrow. "And if I refuse?" His expression grew somber. "Then I would have to ensure that the security of this facility remains uncompromised." Nyra held his gaze. "You mean you'd kill me?" she stated flatly. He didn't flinch. "No, I wouldn't kill you, but the result would be the same. We would both die a slow, agonizing death as the life support system failed." A heavy silence filled the room. Nyra's tail twitched slightly, and she glanced away for a moment. "I don't have much of a choice, do I?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I'm afraid you don't." Nyra sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Fine, I'll join your crew." "That was fast," said Therak, suspicious. Nyra held up a finger. "But I have conditions." Therak raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "I want full access to the facility's systems," she declared. "If I'm to help maintain this place, I need to know what I'm working with." He regarded her thoughtfully. "Access will be granted as appropriate." She nodded, accepting the compromise. "And I expect to be treated with respect," she declared. "No more locking me in rooms or making threats." A hint of a smile tugged at the corner of Therak's mouth. There was that audacity again. "I'm afraid not. At least, not yet. I've seen what you can do with a set of tools. Until I feel I can trust you, I'll be watching you closely." "Are you scared of me, Mr. Ferran Warrior?" Nyra asked as she took a bite of the meat. Her eyes opened wide, seemingly startled by the taste, but she quickly regained her composure. Therak considered his response. Should he fear her? He inhaled her scent deeply and let out a low growl as chills chased over him. It felt like a magnet was pulling his entire body towards her. The growl continued to rumble in his chest as he reeled himself back in. "You're dangerous," he said at last. Nyra's mouth hung open slightly. The bite she had been bringing to her mouth froze in her fingertips. She suddenly had difficulty meeting his eyes. Her hips shifted as she cleared her throat. "Please tell me you got my medicine," she said. "Not yet. he admitted. When? She pressed. As soon as my knee gets better. I aggravated it yesterday while hauling back the meat you're eating, he said. And how long will that take? I need to take my medicine every day, she said, seemingly disturbed by the thought of being unmedicated around him. Her worried expression comforted him. It made him trust her more. It usually only takes a day or two for the swelling to go down when it gets like this, said Therak. He paused for a moment, considering. How bad is the heat for you? Do you want me to leave you alone? Once again, Therak's consideration for her seemed to confuse her. Her brows furrowed and she shook her head. It's nothing I can't handle, at least for now. All right. Let me know if it gets worse. I have excellent discipline, but if you suddenly jumped me, I don't know if I'd be able to stop myself, said Therak. Nyra stared at him, dumbfounded, as if she'd just stumbled upon an impossible enigma. Are you trying to trick me right now? Is this some twisted attempt to get me to like you? Surely you don't think I'm that stupid. Outrage surged through Therak at her words. He snarled and slammed his palm lightly on the table, causing her to jump. You dare question my honor? Don't mistake me for one of your pathetic Panthera males. Trickery is the tool of the weak. His stool scraped against the floor as he stood and loomed over her. Do I look weak to you? He growled. Nyra shrank under his towering height, her ears flattening as her entire body was cast in his shadow. No, not weak. She gasped, her breath starting to come in quick, shallow pants. He could smell her fear mixing with her musk as she began to panic. Her terror startled him, shocking him out of his outrage. He quickly grabbed his stool and sat back down. I shouldn't have done that. Are you okay? He asked. No, I'm not. I'm not okay. I'm not okay at all, she said. Her voice caught in her throat as she wrapped her arms tightly over her chest and folded over, her body shuddering. A powerful sense of empathy affected Therak as the innocent Felina in front of him began to break. Her pheromones ripped open the mental barriers he'd placed around his heart, forcing him to feel her distress. Unable to bear what he'd wrought, he hid his face in his hands. I'm sorry, he said, his voice fading to a whisper. I didn't mean to scare you, he said softly. If you didn't want to scare me, she said, killing everyone I know and imprisoning me is a strange way to go about that. Therak closed his eyes at her accusations. I know. I wish I had talked to you first. I wish I had sent you and your friends on your way. Ancestors, what have I done? Nyra's ears swiveled forward at his words. Her trembling began to subside as she watched his broad shoulders sag with remorse. She stood slowly, her arms loosening their grip around her chest. She seemed to steady as she took in the sight of his genuine distress. A calculating expression crossed her face, passing so fast that it barely registered. She reached out her hand and placed it gently on his arm. Her touch was electric. Therak jumped at the shock of it. Therak, she said slowly, I didn't mean to question your honor. I'm just not used to males like you. He lifted his gaze, eyes meeting hers. A thrill shot through him as Nyra studied his face. Her eyes were golden pools that seemed to suck him in. His heartbeat quickened, each pulse palpable within his coursing veins. His emotions were a mess. He didn't know what he was feeling anymore. He pulled away. I should go. He stood, only to find her hand had slipped into his. What are you doing? He asked. I need to go, she said. His brows furrowed. Huh? I need to go to the bathroom, she clarified. He nodded slowly. A faint smile touched her lips. Can you escort me, Mr. Guardian? She said alluringly. Therak's eyes narrowed slightly. I suppose. Nyra relaxed a bit more, the tension easing from her shoulders. Just one more bite before we go. This meal is quite good, she said, taking another bite of the meat, then spoke around her food. Do you always eat like this? Therak shook his head. No. She tilted her head slightly. How do you normally eat? Nutrient paste, he replied, a touch of melancholy in his tone. I haven't had fresh meat in a long time. Nyra tilted her head in the other direction. Then she stood and waited for him by the door. He pressed his hand against the access panel, and the door slid open. Soon after, he found himself walking side by side with her down the hall towards his room. The sudden change in her behavior was odd, but at least she wasn't paralyzed by fear anymore. Have you not had any of the dromedary yet? She asked. I haven't, he admitted. She considered his words. Why not? Therak blinked. I honestly don't know, he realized. Somehow all the meat I've made has wound up in your belly. Nyra had an odd look on her face as she took in his confession. Her ears tilted slightly back with uncertainty. She slowed her march a bit, as if considering something. Then she shook her head. She huffed a deep breath. Her hesitating ceased as she seemed to come to a decision, and a broad smile crossed her face as she glanced up at him. Once they got to his room, she startled him by gently grabbing his hand and guiding it to press on the panel, opening the door. She then walked a couple of steps away from him and hooked her thumbs onto her waistband. Therak froze as she began pulling her pants down as she walked, shimmying her hips as she moved the fabric down her body. Oh gosh, I really gotta go, she exclaimed. She hopped and tripped as she pulled down her pants, tipping over as she seemingly lost her balance. She fell onto all fours, and her back arched magnificently as she lifted her tail, showing him a flash of pink. Oops. Thrills chased over Therak as his hair stood on end. He quickly averted his gaze as the bulge in his pants got painfully hard. The aged fabric strained to contain him. Therak turned to the door and considered running down the hall. So, Therak, tell me more about what it's like to be Ferin, she called. If we're going to live together, I'd like to understand your culture better. Therak halted his escape, opting instead to just keep the door open so that he could get fresh breaths of air that weren't filled with concentrated musk. Honor is central to our way of life, he called back. Is that why you exploded back there? She asked. Personal pride is a small part, he admitted. But more important is integrity, respect, and responsibility to others. He paraphrased words his king had said long, long ago. If we see something wrong, we must act. It's our way of life, he said somberly. Is keeping a civilian caged in this place responsible or respectful? She asked. Therak closed his eyes and sighed. We're not rehashing that topic, Nyra. Anything else you want to talk about? Why do you sound so far away? She asked. I'm getting fresh air by the door, he responded. Okay, well, could you get me some water? That meat was salty and I'm really thirsty. The sink in my room isn't working, she said. Therak stood by the doorway, trying to steady his thoughts. Nyra's presence was affecting him more than he'd like to admit, and he needed to keep his distance. Therak, she said from the bathroom, was the meat supposed to be that salty? He turned slightly, keeping his gaze averted. Was it too much? He asked. I might have overdone it with the seasoning. She hesitated before replying. No, it wasn't bad at all. Actually, I really liked it. But I'm still thirsty. Could you bring me some water? He glanced toward the sink. There's a cup on the counter, he replied. You can help yourself when you're done. Nyra sighed softly. I'm going to be here for a while and I'm thirsty now. Could you please bring me some? Therak frowned. You can wait. he said firmly. Please? She asked again, her tone more insistent. He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve. No, he replied curtly. I'd prefer not to be near you more than necessary until we can get your medication. I don't want us to do something we'd both regret. There was a moment of silence from the bathroom. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter. I understand. Another pause settled between them. Nyra then asked, Why don't we go to my ship today? We can walk slowly, just as long as we're back before nightfall. How far away did you say it was? What direction? It's a couple of hours at a run, Therak answered, leaving out the direction on purpose. Anyway, it's too far for a walk. Why? She pressed, genuine curiosity in her voice. He sighed. Because this facility could leave at any time. Most of the time, it only gives an hour's warning before it lifts off. We can't risk being away when that happens. There was a rustling sound, and Nyra leaned forward, peeking out from the bathroom doorway. Her eyes were wide with surprise. This is a ship, she exclaimed. How? What kind of engines does this place use? What's the output of the power plant? Therak allowed himself a slight smirk at her astonishment. You can find all that out if you decide to join the crew, he said. She scrunched up her face, giving him a petulant look. Nyra pondered his words for a moment, before slowly pulling her head back into the bathroom, her gaze lingering on him as she went. Fine, she muttered. Keep your secrets. When she was done, Therak escorted her back to her room so that she could finish her meal. He then gave her a light tour of the facility's common areas, showing her the mess hall, the shower facility, the rest of the crew quarters, the control room, and the medical bay. If you can get the lab running here, we can get the AI to duplicate your medicine, he said, pointing to the chemist's dream that was sitting unused in the corner. It can synthesize pretty much anything. Nyra marveled at the facilities. This place is a gold mine, she mumbled. Therak narrowed his eyes at her, but she didn't seem to notice. He let the comment go. A couple more days passed while Therak's knee healed. Nyra alternated from crying when she thought she was alone to trying to seduce him whenever he came to care for her needs. Whether it was because of her hormones or because she was trying to dupe him somehow, he wasn't sure. Either way, he was greatly looking forward to getting her medication. By the evening on the third day, his knee was recovered enough to make the long run. That day, Nyra had been acting particularly desperate as her heat burned up her brain. Therak pretended he didn't notice. She might have a bombshell body and beautiful eyes, but he didn't like the power dynamic between them. It would be cruel to accept her advances. Her attempts were nothing he couldn't handle. A little girl like her couldn't shake him. At least that's what he told himself, as he removed his clothes and settled down for yet another restless night of sleep. He resolved himself to get her medicine first thing the next morning. It would hurt his knee, but it would be worth the pain. If they were going to work together, having clear heads was an important first step.